WoW raids are already full of spectacle, but every once in a while Blizzard hides something extra spicy behind a mechanic, a trigger, or a mythic-only lockout. These secret or hard to access phases range from pure chaos to sometimes maybe just being a little forgettable. And at number 10, we have Halion from the Ruby Sanctum. Halion was meant to be a bridge between Wrath and Cataclysm. And while the raid itself might have been forgettable, the boss had one of WoW's earliest dual realm mechanics. On Heroic, you weren't just fighting in a physical world. You had to split your raid between the reality and the Twilight Realm, managing synchronized DPS, laser walls, and constant ad pressure. What made this fight unique was how easy it was to underestimate. You'd go in thinking filler raid boss, and suddenly you're juggling dimensional phasing like it's a math class. What made this heroic phase so demanding was the synchronization requirement. Players in both realms had to deal equal damage to the boss, or risk one half of the raid wiping the other. That tight coordination was rare in pre-mythic fights. Mechanically, the rotating cutter beams, meteor strikes, and adds like Living Infernos and Shadow Pulsars forced each group to adapt quickly and communicate constantly. This encounter also laid the groundwork for future dual realm and dual phase fights, like Ny'alotha or Denathrius, enabling how Blizzard would use parallel dimensions as a mechanic going forward, not just a visual gimmick. Amongst players, Halion didn't get much love for his setting or story, but the heroic mode became known as a surprisingly tough coordination check for progression guilds. It went from bonus loot boss to a genuine test of raid discipline when you flip that difficulty toggle. A sleeper hit, mechanically speaking. So what made this a secret phase though? Well, the Twilight Realm on normal were something you'd hop between as a whole group. Only on Heroic did you have to be in both at the same time. While this is a pretty normal mechanic nowadays, this wasn't really a thing yet at the time, and set the stage for future fights. Although having to have both players fight in two different phases at once is kind of stretching as far as secret phases go, which is why it's only at number 10 on this list. But at the time, this was as close to a completely new phase on Heroic compared to normal as you could get. So real quick, before we dive deeper into today's topic, I need to show you something I've been messing around with lately. And by lately, I mean the game I've been playing obsessively since my first sponsorship back in January. Let me introduce you to one of the coolest factions in the game, the Sylvan Watchers. They've got some of the wildest design I've seen for elves. We're talking about champions made of plants, mushrooms, and even full-on tree warriors. My favorite is my boy Kaldor. He is easily my highest DPS champion by a mile, and it's not even close. He has a passive that gets stronger based on how many other Sylvan Watchers are on his party, and with a full team, he gets a straight 150% damage boost. And no, this is not common. It literally makes him hit as hard as 2.5 champions. But he needs support. So my man Orn, the Mushroom Man, helps him with poisons, Patrick gives him buffs, Elva brings him back to life if he dies, and Saoirse just burns things. Seriously, if you like collecting cool characters and building unique teams, this faction's got you covered. Also, don't miss the Chimera Clan boss. You can only fight it twice a week and it's got a bit of a twist. You can activate challenges mid-fight to make it harder, but the rewards get way better. It's like activating a secret phase and there are 12 different triggers. It drops a super rare crafted material that's used to make an item so good and rare, most champions don't even have one equipped. It's one of the most rewarding fights in the game and it's 100% worth doing with your clan. So if you haven't started yet, now's the time. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen to get the epic Sylvan Watcher champion Kellan the Shrike, epic top tier healer champion Uugo after hitting level 15, and with promo code TreeHugger, you'll unlock the legendary champion Green Warden Ruark, but only on a brand new account. There's also extra promo codes in description for new and returning players, so don't miss out. And yeah, find me under the Dual Logs and join my clan, Heroes Cool Squad. Let's take down the Chimera together. And at number 9, we have Sire Denathrius from Castle Nathria. While his normal and heroic versions were already cinematic, the mythic phase added even more pressure. In the final stage, Denathrius brings out extra reward mechanics and overlapping casts that push the raid's movement and burst damage to the brink. But that's not why he's on this list. On Mythic, during Phase 3, the raid gets split into two again, just like with Halion, although this time with a bit of a twist. Half the raid will have to enter the mirrors to go into the Shadow Realm, and you can see the shadows of the raid members on the other zone as you both occupy the same space. If the raid members ever cross over each other and touch someone in the other phase, you both die instantly. And seeing the shimmer of the other side players is kind of difficult for people in the shadow side. So the best way to handle this was to have the tanks and melee DPS go into the shadow side and then leave the range up top. And that's pretty much as far as the secret phase goes. From here on out, the other ones on this list will actually add whole-ass phases to the fight. And at number 8, we have Imperator Margok from Highmaul. Margok was already a complex fight with 4 distinct phases, each tied to a different magical buff. But Mythic difficulty unlocked one of WoW's best bait-and-switch moments. Just when you think it's over, Cho'Gall shows up. Out of nowhere, he hijacks the fight and forces a final 5th phase, full of void corruption and shadow mechanics. In this final phase, Cho'Gall begins to corrupt Margok and the arena itself. Players must deal with the Darkstar eruptions that silence casting in large zones, and unstable apparitions that spawn relentlessly, forcing perfect control and AoE cooldown planning. The interrupt rotation becomes brutal, especially with multiple aberrations cast at once. Void zones also begin to overlap erratically, cutting off movement space and turning the encounter into a claustrophobic nightmare. This phase fundamentally changes how groups approach the entire fight. Guilds had to hold cooldowns, practice new ad positioning, and completely shift priorities on the fly. No encounter journal entries spoiled it. The surprise nature of Cho'Gall's appearance, combined with a massive leap in difficulty, made this one of the most memorable mythic twists of Warlords of Draenor, and also made it one of the longest boss fights in the game's history, with kills taking nearly 20 minutes long. And at number 7, we have Ny'alotha the Corruptor from Ny'alotha. Ny'alotha was supposed to be the ultimate old god fight, and while his early phases were a little underwhelming, the mythic exclusive secret phase was also underwhelming. If your group was strong enough, you'd be teleported to the Chamber of the Heart, fighting to protect Azeroth's literal life force from annihilation. Visually, the phase was pretty cool, filled with a radiant golden light and shimmering void corruption, creating a surreal contrast that felt truly end of the world. Mechanically, this phase brought in thought harvesters that tried to drain the heart of Azeroth's energy, forcing players to burn down ads while juggling their sanity meters. Players also had to deal with repeated casts of Stupefy Glare and Eternal Torment, which limited safe zones and punished poor positioning. The final stretch became a high-intensity juggling act of interrupt rotations, sanity restoration, ad control, and strict damage checks. Community reception was very negative regarding Ny'alotha's placement in the expansion's narrative, but this phase was widely thought of as not very good or interesting either. However, it wasn't as long as Cho'Gall's edition, so it gets a slightly higher spot on this list. And at number 6, we have the Jailer from Sepulcher of the first ones. Say what you want about Shadowlands, but Blizzard pulled out all the stops with Jailer on Mythic. Even if everyone hated his lore, the fight was actually very good. After Phase 3, there was a secret 4th phase. The phase was mostly a combination of Phase 3 mechanics, but it added some new mechanics as well, and most famous of them all was Death Sentence. This ability would choose a raid member and then kill them after 30 seconds, while doing a ton of damage the whole time it was up. If it was dispelled, it would duplicate and spread, so there would be 2 death sentences instead of 1, and then it would go up to 4, then 8, and so on, you get the picture. You just had to pump heals into the death sentence targets, and then wait until the very last second to dispel them, then repeat the process all over again with 2 times the amount. This added a softened rage timer to the fight where you had to down the boss ASAP before your raid got overrun by this debuff. Players universally agree that this mythic phase, while exhausting, felt like a proper final test. Echo's world first clear required over 270 pulls, and even then, the victory margin was razor thin. Community reception was mixed on Shadowlands as a whole, but this final mythic phase earned praise for being super mechanically dense, and unforgiving in a way that made finally clearing it feel like a true accomplishment. The only reason it's not higher on this list is because the secret phase itself was just not bombastic enough. And at number 5, we have Garrosh Hellscream from the Siege of Orgrimmar. Garrosh's fight was already a sprawling, lore-heavy encounter, but Heroic Mode added something special, a 4th phase where Y'Shaarj fully takes over. Everything goes purple, Garrosh becomes a tentacle abomination, and you're dodging chaos while burning him down before he wipes the planet. Mechanically, this mythic-only phase introduced empowering whirling corruptions with additional adds called Manifestations of Pride, which had to be killed quickly and cleanly to prevent raid-wide chaos. Players also had to manage overlapping Desecrate and Annihilate mechanics in a shrinking arena filled with damaging void zones and corrupted energy swirls. Timing was critical. Any slip in execution could trigger a chain reaction of deaths. When it comes to secret hard mode phases, Garrosh takes the cake. You got a brand new zone to fight in, a future version of Stormwind with all the faction leaders impaled on stakes, and the phase itself is hard, so you'd see it quite often after a ton of pulls just to learn it, since you couldn't get in any practice on the easier difficulties. It's almost impossible to top this secret phase. And at number 4, we have Archimonde from Hellfire Citadel. Archimonde was the final boss of World of Draenor, and Mythic difficulty made sure he went out with a bang. After the standard phases, Mythic introduced a completely exclusive final phase which takes place inside the Twisty Nether itself, the realm where demons come from and the only place where they can truly die. In this phase, players must split their raid to handle waves of Void Stars and Shadow Netherwalkers, while also managing Rot Chaos Beams that must be precisely angled across the room to avoid wiping the group. There are also Nether Tear buffs which force players to plant Void Zones in very specific locations, creating a slowly collapsing arena with minimal safe zones. The phase culminates in closing rifts before the Void consumes everything, requiring flawless mobility and raid coordination, something heavily offset by the beefy add-ons of the time. Archimonde was so coordination heavy that it pushed what raid add-ons could be allowed to show players to the limits, and eventually ended with Blizzard banning a ton of the functionality that allowed players to handle these mechanics in the first place, while also making Blizzard tone down the amount of raid coordination that required these add-ons in the first place. Mythic Archimonde was truly the boss fight that was so hard it changed raiding from there on out. In fact, there might not ever be a boss fight as coordination heavy as Archimonde ever again. The lore implications of the secret phase were also huge. Archimonde isn't just being defeated, he's being banished back to the Twisting Nether, where all demons are truly slain. It's a permanent death for one of the Legion's most powerful generals, and doing so in the Nether itself seals his fate. This mythic-only finale is widely looked back on as great for its difficulty and payoff, even if people at the time thought it was too hard and needed to be nerfed for the normal player. There is really nothing that can top this secret phase. And at number 3, we have Mimiron Firefighter mode from Ulduar. Pressing the big red button behind Mimiron is one of WoW's most iconic hard mode triggers. While this isn't a secret phase in the strictest sense, it's so drastically different from normal mode that it feels like one, and is the precursor to secret phases anyway. Mechanically speaking, activating the red button causes the entire room to catch fire. Napalm shells leave burning patches that persist and force constant movement. The walls spew fire beams that rotate in patterns, punishing anyone who isn't paying attention. Proximity mines litter the floor, and frost bombs must be managed carefully, or they'll freeze multiple players and get them caught in the overlapping fire. And Mimiron's 4 robot forms overlap their abilities more aggressively. Compared to the more structured pacing of normal mode, Firefighter mode is a non-stop onslaught. Raid leaders had to carefully assign roles for interrupting, avoiding overlapping AoEs, and executing clean transitions between phases. Even top guilds found it punishing during progression and led to being called one of the hardest classic era boss fights. Players on a whole loved this mode, not just for the difficulty, but because it was opt-in. You chose this chaos. It was one of the first time Blizzards let players dial up a fight mid-raid. The fact that it was initiated by a literal red button only added to its fame, especially when the clueless new player would push it by accident. Firefighter Mimiron wasn't just a not-so-secret phase, it was an experience, and one that helped define how future hard modes and secret mechanics would evolve in WoW. Fire covers the floor, lasers shoot everywhere, proximity mines swarm the room, and all of Mimiron's robot parts start overlapping their mechanics. It turns a structured fight into a full-blown panic simulator. Players loved it because it felt like you were inviting disaster on purpose and then trying to win anyway. There's almost no other secret phase that can really top this. And at number 2, we have Gul'dan from the Nighthold. After seemingly defeating him, he draws on the power of Sargeras one last time, ripping open a rift to the Twisting Nether. Sargeras enters Illidan's body, and we have to beat the living daylights out of him, setting the stage for an entirely new, mythic-exclusive final phase. This secret phase is basically a cakewalk compared to the rest of the fight, but only for mythic-level raiders who are prepared. There is a ton of ad management, as well as phases where Illidan has a little burn window where he takes more damage, but it's, funny enough, more efficient to skip this phase to clean up ads than it is to turn and burn most of the times. Once you down the boss, Illidan takes control of his body again and the fight is over. Lore-wise, this phase is crucial. It marks Gul'dan's final moment of desperation, his ultimate pact with Sargeras, and the closing chapter of the alternate Draenor storyline. Illidan's reappearance also signaled the coming war with the Burning Legion. Fans loved this not just for the difficulty, but because it tied together narrative threads from multiple expansions. You didn't truly defeat Gul'dan unless you saw him fall while staring into the void, and that made this secret phase legendary. There is almost nothing that can top this. This is the definition of how to do a secret hard mode phase right. And at number 1, we have Ragnaros from the Firelands. Most players expected the Fire Lord to die at 10%, like so many bosses before him, but not on Heroic. At 10%, Ragnaros gets out of the lava and grows tiny little legs. A secret final phase begins. This final act introduced entirely new mechanics and visual spectacle, as you get to see the stationary Fire Lord move around for the first time ever. Mechanically, the 4th phase was also packed with fire-based chaos. Ragnaros begins casting Empowered Sulphurous, requiring players to interrupt. He summons engulfing flames and living meteors that fixate on players, exploding if they make contact. Most iconic of all, Dread Flame patches begin to spread uncontrollably across the platform, unless extinguished with special traps, adding a positioning puzzle that punished sloppy movement. Players had to coordinate perfectly to control the fire while maintaining burn damage on the boss, all while dodging waves of lava scions and flame geysers erupting from the ground. The room's entire atmosphere changed as well. The music swelled, the platform lit up in fire, and Ragnaros towered above the raid with his legs visible for the first time ever. For a generation of WoW players who had only ever seen him wasted in Molten Core, this was very memorable. Players loved this phase because it felt earned. It was a culmination of everything Firelands built towards. A final challenge that turned a nostalgic villain into a worthy end boss. Its final phase was also just harder than all its other phases. So hard they had to remove a mechanic from it so it could be killable, and set the precedent for future secret final phases not being quite as hard as its previous phases, because you don't really get to practice it very much. The surprise, the scale, and difficulty combined to make this one of the most unforgettable moments in raid history. You didn't just beat Ragnaros, you survived his wrath. Alright, and that's the video. Secret phases in WoW are a rare treat. They happen so infrequently, in fact, that there was barely enough for a top 10. If you think I missed any other secret phases, or if you have an idea for a future video just like this one, please let us know down in the comments below. Until next time, may all your big, red, shiny buttons lead to loot and not wipes. And don't forget, scan the code or click the link and claim your free champions before it's too late.